So I'd like to invite Iñaqui Carnicero on stage, please. Iñaqui is the Secretary General for Urban Agenda, Housing and Architecture of the Spain government. Please, Iñaqui. So just a few words, but first of all, thanks for being such a reference for all of us, because you are an amazing architect, honestly one of the best of your generation, but at the same time you are part of, let's say, of politics. So you are directly involved in politics. And just a few weeks ago, I was with you in Madrid, where together with the Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, you were proposing a very, let's say, strong, but at the same time pragmatic vision and strategy on public housing, on to, let's say, accelerate through industrialization the creation of social housing settlement in Spain. So I would really love if you could a little bit explain us how this vision was developed and how are you imagining to make it landing on the ground, not only Spain, I hope. Thanks, Iñaqui.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you, Stefano, first of all, for the invitation to have this informal conversation. It's so basically this all started some years ago when important investments coming from Europe because of the pandemic arrived, and we thought it was important to not respond to the urgency of that time by distributing those different investments among the different administrations that are responsible to promoting public procurement, but also to think about the quality of those investments. On the one hand, we all know that we have this urgency on responding to climate change, decarbonizing the built environment, but at the same time, we cannot allow this urgency to keep on doing what I think are bad practices, like the public procurement based on discounts, based on the interest of promoters or contractors. So this gave us the opportunity to develop a law on high-quality architecture that incorporates architecture as an asset of general interest for its capacity to affect people's quality of life. At that time, it helped the situation that was happening, where we could prove, where we could see in our own houses how the built environment is related with other issues like health. And here I have to publicly thank Beatriz Colomina for the amazing work she did at that time, saying that architecture is sometimes more connected to health than other issues, because it was a way to translate this message to politicians, to translate the idea that by intervening in our typologies, in our built environment, is the way that we can achieve other things. So in the very specific case that you asked some weeks ago, our Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, was announcing this strategic plan, PERTE, on industrialization. Why? Not only to help the industries, but because we know that there is a goal that we need to achieve sooner than later, which is the decarbonization of the built environment. And it's been proved that by building off-site, we reduced clearly CO2 emissions, but at the same time, this connects with other policies that are relevant, that are related to the inequalities that are here exhibited. For instance, the gender gap that exists in construction, where only 12% of the construction workers are women. By promoting policies such as industrializations, we are helping to modernize the construction sector. We are helping developing an industry promoting talent of young people that want to work in factories with computers, with robots, using their intelligence to build a different environment that we have. So that was the important investment that the President Sanchez was announcing, which is something also very interesting and it's connected with what is happening here, that we need more audiences where we have politicians, where we have promoters, contractors, architects, engineers, people from the world of art to work all together. Because we share, I think, 80–90% of our goals. We all want to design this new agreement between the environment, the people, and the territory, so it's important that we are coordinated and working together towards that goal.
Iñaqui, thank you so much. I think it was such a system of good people. Thank you again. So I have the honor to invite Michael Spence on the stage. Michael Spence is, a very famous economist. He was graduated in philosophy, mathematics, and economy, and he was, as you all know, the winner of the Nobel Prize in 2001 with George Akerlof and Joseph Stiglitz. Michael, up to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stefano, Director General Morogallo, Eminences, colleagues, friends. I'm a little out of place here, but I'm thrilled to be with people whose lives are so thoroughly entwined with creative things, and I think it's important to tackle this subject from that point of view and not just from the point of view of the dismal science, which is what I represent. But I am going to spend a little time talking to you in various dimensions about how the world looks in terms of inequality, and hope it's of interest. This is, if you take a very long view, this is a picture of inequality divided into inequality within countries or societies and inequality globally, that is across. The red line is the within country picture. It didn't change much these are over, centuries now. But we did have a kind of golden age after World War II. It didn't last, unfortunately. It lasted from roughly the end of World War II until 1980 and then reverted and is approaching levels that were associated with the Gilded Age at the start of the 20th century. The other line is very interesting. That is the amount of inequality associated with inter-country differences. And the reason it rose so quickly, this graph starts in 1880, so it's roughly the start of the Industrial Revolution, is that roughly 15% of the world's population that lives in advanced countries, what we now call developed countries, started to grow, and everybody else didn't. And so this inter-country difference has kept rising and rising, and the momentum carried it through World War II, but you can see this dramatic reversal that occurred somewhere in the 1970s. And this is associated with something truly wonderful, which is the growth of opportunities, income, wealth, and all the things that go with it in the developing world. This is a picture of the recently released Human Development Report, and I'm going to spend a minute on this because I think the Human Development Report and the Human Development Index are probably more relevant on the economic side to what you all hope to accomplish in the 24th Exposition, because it takes a very broad view of what human progress is. It's not just income and wealth, it's health, education, but especially opportunity, and as the minister mentioned, agency. The feeling that people need to be in a position to make choices, to exercise their creativity, and so on. And this needs to be the core of what one means by progress. And this one happens to be on artificial intelligence. I was in Brussels to help release it. If you look at the Human Development Index, which is published every year, it's impressive. It keeps rising. This was developed as a result of the initiative of Amartya Sen, who said that we needed to spend time on this. And it's been rising and rising, but we have a problem. And the problem is that the rate of increase, which one expected and hoped for got knocked off course at the start of the COVID pandemic, and then in the face of multiple shocks from wars, pandemics, geopolitical tensions, and especially climate shocks, we've knocked it off course again. And so the rate of increase and improvement in the lives of all the people who are captured in this aggregate assessment has been improving, but at a much, much slower rate. This is a quick sort of assessment of that. And this is the picture of the difference between the high human development countries, largely the developed world, and the lowest human development index countries. And that difference kept going down, and in this period that we're now living in, that I'm sure the exhibitions will wrestle with, we've reversed that pattern. I think the message from this slide is the one I worry about most, which is most of the world is facing headwinds from these shocks, the latest one, of course, coming from my country, thanks to the Trump administration. But most of the world, middle income, high middle income countries, and the rest of us who have the privilege of living in advanced countries are weathering this storm reasonably well. We have vulnerable populations that we have to deal with, but the low-income countries aren't weathering it well. And the reason you see that red reversal is because we are losing them in the course of the trajectory of the global economy. The pandemic took all their fiscal resources. Think of the ability of government to protect and buffer shocks. The climate shocks are bigger, and so on. This is a complete aside, but if you want to know the current assessment of the Trump tariffs and where they're going to be largest, the answer is the United States. It's a self-imposed wound. If you look inside countries, I'm going to use the United States initially because it's an extreme case. You get a very different picture than the one I just painted. This is data published by the St. Louis Fed, which is the St. Louis part of our central bank. And the top three bars here are the net worth, that is assets minus liabilities, of the household sector. And those three, the dark green, the light green, and the light blue, account for 2/3 of the net worth and 10% of the population. This is just stunning. This little tiny yellow thing at the bottom, that's the net worth of the bottom 50%. 50. This is the same thing in shares. It hasn't changed much over time, but the picture is not pretty. This is the bottom 50%. Their net worth assets have increased, so it's not as if they're falling behind. Falling back, but they are for sure falling behind. The sharing through the income and wealth, this is wealth, but income and wealth distribution of the growth in this particular country has been highly uneven. And I think almost without exception, people would agree that while it's not the only source of the political and social polarization that we are wrestling with, it's certainly a contributing factor. And this is the essentially the bottom third, up to the 90% level. This is not confined to the United States, although the United States and maybe the UK are the extreme versions of this. So at the bottom you can see, it's a little hard to read, and maybe I'll leave this behind, but these are European countries and the US, not all of them. But you see the same pattern. The top 10% rising, the bottom 10%, the bottom 50% declining. So we have a set of common issues, some of them diagnostic and some of them developing effective countermeasures. And the reason these are important is not because the only thing in people's lives is income and wealth. In fact, it's not. It's because with sufficiently low resources available to households, achieving the things they really care about is much, much more difficult. So when I chaired a commission on growth and development, about a decade and a half ago, and it was on growth, mainly in developing countries. And people said, why are you focusing on growth? And people said, you know, people don't care about growth. They may care about income and wealth. They care a whole lot more, you know, about opportunity, you know, the ability to be creative, productive, appreciated as a contributing member of a society. They appreciate being respected for whoever they are. All those things matter. They appreciate health and access to services, everything you've heard this morning. The reason we economists occasionally fall back and focus on growth and related things like productivity, especially in developing countries, is because it's very difficult to provide the things that underpin people's well-being, creativity and all that on a sustainable basis without the growth. So it's a means to an end, not an end in itself. So this is my crude assessment of why it is that we should take this multidimensional attitude toward growth. I think that in my world, the Human Development Report and Index goes in this direction, but certainly what you will do in this set of exhibitions, the 24th version, will dramatically enhance and enrich this process. I want to say one other thing, which to me is important, and that is part of inequality is about trust. Trust in institutions. So let me give you an example. Again, I'll use it from my own country. I've already showed you what the condition is of the bottom 50%. Many of them are living paycheck to paycheck. Many of them live in communities that were adversely affected in a major way by globalization and or technology and automation. And they read in the press, you know, the traditional press, the American economy is doing great. And they think to themselves, that doesn't seem right. Maybe they don't understand what they're talking about. Maybe they're lying, etc. Maybe they're biased. But the point is, if you see what I'm saying, is that at least 50% of our population have a life experience that doesn't correspond even closely with what's going on out there. And the net effect of that is to distrust the sources of information that we traditionally rely on, media, experts, and so on. And that's a picture of a recent Gallup poll assessment of the level of trust in various institutions on the American economy. You can find similar surveys and polls done in a wide range of countries. I find this very worrying. And if you wonder why the internet is such an important source of, in quote, news, and sometimes fake news, this is part of the answer. On the other hand, there is some good news, and there's one more dimension I want to talk about. I'll just do it briefly. It's the intergenerational one. I think it's fair to say that an important dimension in the inequality problem is that young people face major hurdles with respect to employment and housing costs in many countries. I'm sure you'll tackle this in the course of your work, but it's a major issue, and I think the reports from Enrico Letta and Mario Draghi, although they sound like they're sort of macroeconomic in focus, are really about whether or not we've created a world in terms of climate change, but also employment, opportunity to be creative and productive for the next generations. I chaired a commission on growth and development, as I told you, to grow at 6 or 7%, which is what the most successful developing countries have done. Never happened before. You have to invest about a third of your annual output GDP. So if you have a $750 per capita income, 250 of it has to go to investment, and that leaves you $500 a year for the rest. Now people look at that and say, nobody would make that choice. That's not rational. The trouble with that intuition is that there's lots of counterexamples. Countries with very low incomes that invested and grew at 6 and 7% and have transformed in a way you saw in the earlier graphs. And I kept asking why as I chaired this commission. And the answer that finally came back is because if they believed in the process and its inclusiveness, the end result was a world in which their children and grandchildren were better off. And I think it's really important value. And I think we've partly lost it at the present time. So that's it. There's some very good news. Artificial intelligence is creating inclusive growth patterns in health, education, access to finance. We have a sustainable version of microfinance now that we didn't have before. There are many, many dimensions of this. So I don't want to leave you on a negative note. We have many challenges, but I think I would summarize all of this in the following way. But this, by the way, is a picture of this global explosion of entrepreneurial activity around the world, driven mainly by young people, mainly by technology. They're just solving problems everywhere. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when you could count on the fingers of one hand that, the tech, dynamic ecosystems, they're everywhere now, literally everywhere. It's just a wonderful thing to see, and it will have a very big impact over time. But the end of my message is this really is a tale of two cities. For those of you who've read Charles Dickens' famous book, it's the best of times and at the same and the worst of times. Thank you very much.